So first of all, thanks to everyone for coming today. We are recording this event so that if you missed it or you missed something or you're like, oh man, what did they just say? You can go back and review it another time. Wanted to thank the sponsors and organizations that help make this possible today. So Reforest London, Signal Boost at Westminster Ponds, Ontario Trillium Foundation, and the Employment and Social Development from the Government of Canada. They're the groups that brought you here today. The organizations that are presenting today, so we'll hear from Marianne Griffith from Green Economy London and myself from rTraction. Marianne has a bit of her bio and background built into her part of the presentation. As a reminder, we are recording this, so if at any point you want us to pause the recording so you can go on off the record with a question or a comment, just let us know and we can do that. Or if in hindsight, if you wish you hadn't said something, send us an email and we can edit that out, because this isn't live to anyone beyond who's in the room here today. A couple of housekeeping activities this morning. So as I mentioned, yes, we are recording this. Sometimes people ask. Yes, we will send out the slide decks if there's additional information, so you don't have to be necessarily taking notes. Bathrooms, normally we highlight where the bathrooms are when we're doing a training session. I don't know. Hopefully you know your own way to those bathrooms at home. If you have any questions as we go, please put them in the chat, and I'm going to ask John to keep tabs on any questions that come up. It's really hard with a Zoom presentation to have people kind of pop in with a question, so put it in the chat. And then John, if you think something's like really urgent to bring up as a question now versus waiting to the question and answer period, feel free to unmute and let us know. Once you get into the breakout rooms, that's your opportunity to unmute and connect with some people. And if you're not familiar with breakout rooms, I'll explain those when we get to them, but feel free to unmute in the breakout room. Brief overview of the agenda. So we have formal presentation remarks from 10 till 11. We're going to have 2 breakout sessions during that time so that you can connect with some colleagues and peers. And then at 11 to 11:30, we have questions and answers. If you can ask questions of the team here. A little bit about me and my background, and how did I get to the point where I'm talking about the UN sustainability goals. One of the first things that know about me is I have a large family, so I have 8 children. So in a few generations, if that pattern continues, we'll occupy most of southwestern Ontario. So sustainability is an important part for me for business reasons and for family ones. In 2013, I was awarded the 20 Under 40 award, and the Canadian Institution of Management 2006 for our work in sustainability, and IABC awarded me the Communicator of the Year in 2018. Again, largely around the work for community engagement. So a lot of these awards are about connecting with the community. In 2014, rTraction was awarded the Small Business of the Year, and no alcohol was consumed before taking this picture, I promise. That's why we were pretty excited about that. But we've been part of the community now since 2001 and have really been strong advocates of community involvement. Also, I was on the board of Pillar Nonprofit Network for 10 years, serving as the board chair for 2014 to 2015, during which time the Innovation Works project was started and created. So was pretty active in helping to see that project come to life, and thrilled to see it flourishing in our downtown. For those of you that aren't familiar with the London Roundhouse, it's a project that actually also won some architectural awards for adaptive reuse, really looking at how we can take our historical buildings and repurpose them to do good within our community. So the Roundhouse is a community hub. It's where rTraction and the RH Accelerator hang their hat and to do work, but we actually have community events hosted there quite frequently, and probably would have had this one held without COVID. We're a certified B Corporation. I'll go into a little bit about more what that means a little later on the presentation when we're talking about some of the tools. But at the end of the day, the difference between a normal corporation and a certified B Corporation is a normal corporation only has to return value to the shareholders. So it's sometimes called shareholder primacy. When you're a B Corp, or not a B Corp, the officers and directors are charged with returning the maximum amount of value back to the shareholders. A B Corp actually changes its articles of incorporation in Canada to be more focused on all of the stakeholders. So all of the stakeholders in a business include the workers, the community, the environment, the customers, the vendors, the government, and it really looks at a holistic view. And the shareholders are included in that as well. It's important to take care of the investment community that are backing the B Corps, but it's not the only stakeholder. And happy to ask more questions about that in the question and answer period if anyone's curious. The rTraction team is a small but mighty team, again, based out of the London Roundhouse. And John from rTraction is here running the show. If you need any support, you can feel free to message him in the chat as well. So using the chat, some of you kind of did this in the prelude, but like to kind of see where people are coming from. So take a couple of minutes, introduce yourself, your organization, region where you're based out of, and if you can give us one word check-in for how you describe how you're feeling coming to this webinar today. Marianne's curious. Skylar's caffeinated. Goal-oriented, like the dash. Pumped from Alex. Fellow B Corp from McCabe. Interested from Jared. Eager.
From Evergreen Energy. Looking forward to hearing what everybody has to say. We got to clean up this world we're living in, and we need to do it yesterday rather than tomorrow. But working together, it's a pleasure working with people in London. I'm from St. Thomas. And we have a new technology that removes viruses. And
cool.
We're here to help the hospitals and schools and those that need it.
So they, just say again, just for clarity's sake, the chat is the text-based tool. Happy to hear from you. We just, having been through this experience a few times, we'll burn through the hour pretty quickly if everyone chimes in over voice, unfortunately. That's what the breakout rooms are designed to do. So as part of the registration process, have you started working with the UN SDGs? So 43% of participants indicated that they are. That leaves 57% that currently aren't. So it's a cool opportunity to bring some new information or hopefully expand some information for people that are familiar with the goals already. I also asked, who, if you were working with the goals, what goals were you already working with? So we had goal 1, no poverty, 4, quality education, decent work and economic growth, reduced inequalities, partnerships for the goals, and I messed up my order there, but 11 for sustainable cities and communities. We also had good health and well-being. And then makes sense. We had a lot of people saying that they were interested in the global goals of climate action and affordable and clean energy. So what we wanted to talk a little bit about initially is if there's anything that you want to get covered today that you're hoping to learn today, and you'd be disappointed if we did not cover, again, post that in the chat. We'll save that for the Q&A if we make sure that if we don't cover it in the materials that we're covering today. So it's an opportunity to kind of check in again and put into the chat anything that you hope to learn today. And the two presenters will make sure that we cover that. If not in the main presentation, then we'll cover it in the Q&A. I wanted to just do a brief overview of the UN Sustainability Goals and how we got to using them today. It's actually been a long journey for the UN. So in 1972, they defined the rights of a family to have a healthy and productive environment as sort of the early concepts of what it means to be sustainable. So we want to make sure that every family on our planet has the right to a healthy and productive environment. For those of you that maybe can hear, there's a Frozen concert going on in the background. Again, enjoy that for what it's worth.
I think, Billson, if you can just let that go, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm doing my best. I'm just trying to do the next right thing. So the next was they really looked at what does sustainable development, what does sustainability mean? And that was in 1983. They did some work to define what sustainable development meant. Going on to 2000, they created the Millennial Development Goals. So actually, when you look at the UN Sustainability Goals and you get into some of the specific targets and indicators, one of the things that you may notice is that there are a lot about the developing nations, and that makes sense for two reasons. One, that's where the most work still needs to be done globally, and two, the UN Sustainability Goals, a lot of them came out of the work from the Millennial Development Goals. So the Millennial Development Goals were specifically focused on the developing world and how to move those nations forward. In 2012, there was a declaration declaring, the future that we want, and then that started the work on the UN Sustainability Goals, because the Millennial Goals technically ended in 2015. So those were the targets that were set in 2015. In 2015, they launched the UN Sustainability Goals, the next chapter. And that's the current trajectory we're on, the current track that we're trying to work towards together, is to hit the goals by 2030. I'm going to briefly touch on all the goals because, again, some people may not be intimately familiar with them at a very high level. You just introduce the concepts. So there's 17 goals in total. First one really focuses on no poverty. So how do we lift people out of poverty in our communities? Next is that there's no hunger. So nobody in the world is going hungry. 3 is that every human sort of has access to good health and well-being tools. 4th is that every human has access to quality education. 5th is that we have gender equality. 6 is that everyone on the planet has access to clean water and sanitation. 7 is that we have access to affordable and clean energy. 8 is that decent work and economic growth in our communities. 9 is that we have industry, innovation, and infrastructure in our communities. Reduced inequalities as well, specifically focusing on the non-gender related inequalities. Sustainable cities and communities. So how do we build better communities together? Responsible consumption and production. 13 is climate action. 14 is life below water. 15 is life on land. So obviously, 14 is focused on the oceans. 15 is focused on the land. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. So what are those institutions that support our ability to achieve the UN Sustainability Goals? And last but not least, partnership for the goals. So how can we work together and collaborate through those goals? One of the things that once you start working with the UN Sustainability Goals, you start to notice that they're really actually interdependent. So for example, it's probably really difficult to achieve zero hunger if you also don't address no poverty. It's really difficult to address zero hunger if you don't have strong institutions. So as you start actually working with the goals, you find that they actually intercede and overlap and intersect, and that's actually fairly normal because you may find you think you're working on something for goal number 1, and then you end up with something as an activity under goal number 8. As a practical example, I'll talk a little bit about living wage a little bit later. We focus on decent work and economic growth, goal 8. A lot of the living wage materials is under the no poverty. So it's sometimes a little bit of a balancing act to say, well, we're focusing on technically all the goals at once. I think a few people said that in their registration response, which is true. What I like to encourage people to do is to focus on specific goals. So why does it matter? Why do we care about these goals? Why are you guys here today? So there's a couple of things that, from my personal bias, that are really important to think about when we think about the UN Sustainability Goals. 2030 is often held out as a key date where if we don't make some changes to our global infrastructure, our climate action, and our climate accords, that we'll be basically at a point of no return for our environment. The second thing I like to bring up, because there are some climate skeptics sometimes in the ecosystem, is to a certain extent, if enough people believe that climate change is real and that climate change is happening, those economic shifts and policy shifts are going to happen. So it's a good idea to get behind them either way. So as the momentum shifts, whether you believe in climate change, whether you don't, whether you believe it's going to be as rapid or as concerning as 2030, seems to be, from my perspective, it doesn't necessarily matter because the rest of the world is going to be pushing towards that. So you'll be left behind if you don't adopt the goals. My preference is that, obviously people do it for the health of our planet, but if it's for monetary and policy reasons, then you're welcome under the tent as well, under the framework of these goals as we look to those objectives. I think the next thing I want to talk about is why I think the goals are gaining traction. So they really only came on my radar in a big way, probably about 1.5 to 2 years ago. And now I'm seeing it more and more prevalently in our community institutions locally. We're seeing it on the global stage. Why are the global goals getting some traction, or the UN sustainability goals? I think there's a couple of different reasons for that. One is actually just, from a graphics design perspective, they're really easy to understand. They have clear iconography that makes it translatable across different languages as well. So whether you're English speaking, French speaking, or any other different language, the graphic here remains sort of universally accessible to you. And I think that's a really powerful part of why I think the goals are gaining traction. Sometimes we talk about, with our company, the needs for our clients to be clear, concise, and consistent with their messaging. That's really where the UN sustainability goals hit a home run. From my perspective. Two, there's a lot of other frameworks that have existed around doing good in community. There's a lot of collective impact frameworks. I think what people are finding is that, regardless of whatever framework you're using existing in your organization or your community, you can easily ladder up or match your objectives to what's happening in the UN sustainability goals. Last but not least, I think there's an increasing awareness of the urgency of climate change. People aren't sure what to do or how to show up in order to affect that change, and the UN sustainability goals give a really easy on-ramp to organizations that are wanting to make an impact, because you can look at the objectives and the goals and align your initiatives to that. I think also with COVID happening, a lot of the UN sustainability goals were created in some cases to hopefully prevent or reduce the impact of a global pandemic, or give us some infrastructure to be able to recover from the UN, from the things like a pandemic. So I think as we look at how organizations are starting to adapt, and in current COVID situations and post-COVID, I think you'll actually start to see these global goals becoming more relevant as well. Why should you map to them? You may be asking. Good question. I think there's a couple of different reasons beyond just it's something you're interested in and something you want to do. I think if you're in the nonprofit or charitable space, you'll start to see an increasing ask from funders about how you line up to the goals, or where your funding objectives line up to the goals, and your ability to look at specific critical indicators and what you're doing. I think it's really key if you want to collaborate with other organizations. It's a really easy framework to use to collaborate. For example, if you're doing environmental action, which is goal number 13, if you're at a networking event and somebody says, "Oh, what goals are you working on?" and they include number 13, you have the instant ability to collaborate over your goals. It reduces a lot of barriers that might normally come up. And last but not least, I believe it's the right thing to do, and I'm super passionate about it. And hopefully you can get some of that from today. So we're going to do a quick breakout room session. For those that haven't done breakout rooms, Zoom gives us the ability to connect into smaller groups. So John will hopefully be balancing those rooms right now. We're going to take about 5 minutes, and we're going to go into breakout rooms. And it's the opportunity. One of the things I think we miss about these types of events, or certainly I do, is the ability to connect with some other people that we might not normally connect with. So a breakout room is the opportunity to do that. So John's going to send us to our breakout rooms, and we have 4 simple questions. John will put them in the chat as well so that we can have them as reference. But basically, your organization, your name, what brings you here today, and what UN SDGs resonate with you, and why. If you're new to the goal, it could just be something simple like, well, I really am working on trying to alleviate poverty, so I'm curious about what that no poverty goal is about. So we're going to take about 5 minutes to connect with some of our colleagues and the breakout rooms, and then we'll come back. Welcome back, everyone. While I get set back up here, does anyone want to share anything that they picked up from the room? You can just unmute. And...
I'll go ahead and share something.
Sure.
I found it interesting that of all, so there was myself and 3 other women in our group, and all of the other 3 and myself, so that 100% of us utilize the SDGs as a matrix in some form of our work, in communicating to stakeholders and funders, etc.
Awesome. Anyone else have time for maybe one more check-in? Thanks, Marianne. All right, going once, and twice, and sold. All right, so moving on. Again, hope everyone can see my screen again. Yeah, good. So a lot of the what I wanted to review today was how you can focus your organization on using the goals. So I'm going to tell a little bit about the rTraction story and how we focused on the goals and how it helped us to gain focus around what we do. The reason I use our story is we know it best, and if people have questions about it, I can answer fully. And I'm going backwards. So really, when we look at the purpose of our organization, we spent a lot of time actually before working on the UN sustainability goals specifically was what can we do? Why does our organization exist? For those of you that are familiar with the Simon Sinek tool set, the why does rTraction exist? And we exist to build stronger communities for a better world. We believe that when people are part of communities and are in healthy relationships with their community, it strengthens and truly builds a better place to live, a better place to be, and even in the global, community definition, makes us all better global citizens. Our vision is that change makers across the social purpose spectrum can connect, share, and grow together. So what that means is that there's lots of people working on global climate change, sustainability change on the for-profit and nonprofit and charitable side, government side. So how can we help those people who are looking to make change to be able to connect, share, and grow together? This webinar is actually part of that vision. Our niche is authentic storytelling. So how we tell the organization's story, how we tell our story in relationship to our goals. And you might see some of that kind of come out today. As I mentioned, we're a certified B Corp. So that was the lens by which we looked at that, our focus, our purpose, how we're showing up to work. Largely because the B Corp community is putting a lot of efforts into the UN sustainability goals as part of its way of measuring what it means to be a certified B Corp. I should also mention it is a certification process that's fairly robust. So you have to actually verify that you're doing all the good things that you say that you're doing. The B Corp community is really looking into these goals, and I'll show you some tools a little bit later on that illustrate what I'm talking about. The main thing that we think we show up as a small business in our community is a lot of the work that we do shows up under decent work and economic growth. When we look at where we have our impact in the work that we actually do, they typically fall into one of 2 areas: sustainable cities and communities, and good health and well-being. And basically, that's the overlap. When we do our work within the community, our clients are oftentimes in that spectrum. So we define a lot of the good that we do by the company that we keep. So here's again a sample of our clients that I mapped to the different areas that we have and where we see their impact showing up. So rTraction can really only influence goal 8, but through our work in the community, we actually can influence goals 11 and 3 as well. At this point, I wanted to turn it over to Marianne so she can talk about the story of green economy.
I am Marianne Griffith, as you can see, and I am with the London Environmental Network, which is the nonprofit organization that hosts Green Economy London, which is a program. I'm a certified energy auditor and a lead green associate. I have a substantial background in building science and building performance. So it comes with a membership of Association of Energy Engineers. I'm a voluntary member of 2 boards of directors, one being Building Better, which focuses on sustainable housing and renewable energy in our neighboring First Nations communities, and the Lola Bees, which is a London, Ontario learning apiary. I have previously worked with some local businesses such as the Root Cellar and Growing Chefs, and focused on sustainable food system education. I have recently made headlines in the London Free Press with my 12-year-old Springer Spaniel, where we announced personal carbon neutral targets by 2030, myself and my colleague Skylar, who's here today. I have a 5-year-old son, and I play guitar in a local band that we perform once a month, but not right now. So hopefully that can start up again. So the purpose of my presentation today is to kind of focus in on how businesses can localize and focus on specific SDGs. I'm going to use the environmental SDGs as examples because that is our wheelhouse. So essentially, the City of London has recently suggested a goal of net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. This comes after years of us collectively deciding that we wanted to focus on emission reduction, both through the Kyoto Protocol and the Paris Agreement. But we believe that in order to do that, we need strong leadership and incentives, but we also need local green leaders and community-led initiatives. And that's kind of the purpose of our organization. And we help businesses and organizations focus in on environmental issues. And I'm going to show you how. Next slide, please. So we are the London Environmental Network. We connect, educate, and support individuals and organizations to transitioning to a more sustainable future. The operation started in 2015 in the community and officially incorporated in 2018. It's a membership-based network that supports over 45 environmental groups in the city and surrounding area. The organization started as a joint collaboration by 2 other environmental nonprofits, Reforest London and the Thames Talbot Land Trust. And they got funding to start the London Environmental Network for 3 years, and it has blossomed into what it is now. Next slide. So these are the LEN members that our network represents. And we try to share resources and strengthen all of the initiatives that these folks are working on. And it's vast across the environmental sector, cycling infrastructure, electric vehicle support, pollination support, reforesting, planting trees, et cetera. So there's a lot of different organizations working on a lot of different initiatives, and we try to create one succinct voice and advocate on behalf of the environmental sector. These are our current programs. Next slide, please. We have Green Economy London, which is what I manage, and it supports businesses and organizations in setting and achieving sustainability targets. Businesses are encouraged to track their emission, waste, or water usage and figure out a sustainability action plan and make reductions. We have network supports, which is what I was talking about in the previous slide. So we share resources with those environmental groups. The Go Wild, Grow Wild Expo is under our umbrella, and it is a one-day expo that generally takes place in April. Unfortunately, this year it was canceled, and it will be online, which you can check out through LEN's social media and our website. And the Environmental Incubator, which is brand new, and we will have 6 projects a year that we will incubate with financial incentives, support, and coaching to execute on their ideas. And then we host a monthly green drink session, which brings environmental ideas to the public, and it's open for anyone to come and join in on a conversation in a social networking event. Next slide. These are our supporters and our funders. We have founding members of Green Economy London that are on the right-hand side there, and they've helped us financially kick off the business sustainability program that I'm running. The Green Economy hubs are across, they're stretching across Canada under the umbrella of Green Economy Canada. It's a nonprofit initiative that is set to help businesses set and achieve sustainability targets in line with reducing emissions across the country, specifically in Ontario. And for us, obviously, we want to localize it and help London organizations meet their reduction targets. Next slide. Our membership, we're very proud of. We surpassed our goals in our first year, and essentially all of the folks that you see here have committed to setting a sustainability target within 3 years of joining our hub. You can see there are many sectors represented, a lot of key players in London that are basically saying that they will be green leaders and help set the tone for what we expect as business as usual going forward. So we've started working with all of these organizations to look at their impact and see how we can help them reduce it. These businesses choose to sign on for a myriad of reasons. Statistically, we find the 4 listed here are the most popular reasons for organizations and businesses to commit to sustainability targets. In my breakout session, there was a young woman there that has just graduated from Development Practice Masters, and she said that it almost entirely focused on SDGs and sustainable development. And that's a trend that comes up again and again, that the youth and the new graduates are much more keen to take on jobs with employers that are aligning with these development goals, are aligning with environmental goals, and are willing to share that publicly with their stakeholders. So as part of our program, target setting is key. And we do ask that people set a target within 3 years so that we can make the reductions that we are all needing. We identified 4 target areas: greenhouse gas emission reduction, waste targets for waste diversion, water targets for reduction, and an environmental stewardship category, which allows organizations and businesses to get more involved in the environmental sector, tree planting, employee-led gardens, etc., different things to enhance the understanding and the culture in the workplace around environmental stewardship. We have aligned our target areas with 6 key sustainable development goals. So this is where I wanted to show you an example of how businesses in London are already identifying alignment with these goals and alignment with our targets, and how you can cross over the SDGs, GEL's targets, and other things like B Corp, and kind of make your messaging clear. So we've shown an example here of how the SDGs align with our targets. And I'll let you read more about that on your own with the slides. It's fairly straightforward. You know, sustainable cities and communities rely on all of the target areas in order to function properly. So we believe that you can't effectively manage what you don't measure. So this graphic kind of gives you an idea of people contemplating their own footprint on the planet and how their individual actions contribute to pollution or greenhouse gas emissions. We encourage our members to first set a baseline of their usage through their facilities and operations. We look at utility data from heating and cooling and electricity bills, as well as water usage and waste hauler information, and then we put together a sustainability report. And that will capture all of that information. It'll make improvement recommendations, gives return on investment information and reduction estimates. And then, to me, the most exciting part of the journey is developing an action plan with the members and the organizations to identify where they feel they can make the most impact, what aligns with their budget, and what they're most interested in, and how they want to communicate that to their employees, to their clients, their stakeholders, etc. So next slide, please. There's a myriad of ways that we will suggest folks meet their targets depending on what their targets are. Some can be as simple as energy or water reduction strategies, such as lighting retrofits, LED lighting retrofits, programmable thermostats, improvements to the facility, such as increased insulation, air exchangers. The photo in the top center there is an air source heat pump, which I'm really turned on by right now. They allow businesses to stop burning fossil fuels for heating and cooling with some new technology that's really come along in the last 5 years. A local example is Reforest London has recently gone onto a geothermal system. They were on propane heating before. So both their emissions and their costs have dropped significantly by implementing that change, and we're able to track that with them. So we've got their data from when they were using propane, and now we've got their data from when they were on geothermal, and we'll be able to, at the end of the year, make a very clear statement on how much they've reduced, how much it's saved them, and it's going to be a great story and a great source of inspiration for other organizations across the city. Other things that, we have a myriad of projects that we recommend for people to help meet the goals, both the sustainable development goals and our target setting goals. They can be renewable energy focused, electric fleets are shown there, waste diversion programs, community and organization tree planting and gardening initiatives. And then the biggest extreme is on the bottom right, and that's setting an aggressive net zero or carbon neutral target. And we can map out how to get there, depending on what the business is. For some people that's practical, and for some people it isn't. And then in the center there, I just wanted to showcase working from home and reduced travel initiatives, which we unfortunately have got some firsthand experience with right now. So implementing these strategies is a suggested way of ongoing emission reduction. So this is the most exciting part for us. What can your organization do? What are the costs involved? What are the payback periods? What will the impact of the project be? And mapping this out with folks and getting them the guidance and the incentives that they need to carry it out. Next slide, please. This is a snapshot of some activity that we've had in our network with our local businesses this year. All of the folks on the right have set a baseline, which isn't a small feat. So we've looked at all of their data and we've come up with where they're starting so that they have a clear path forward for where they want to be. So we'll be able to report on their emission, water, or waste reduction. The folks in the middle have set targets, and we'll be working towards them over the next year. And on the left, we've got kind of our prime example of the City of London, where they have set a target historically. So they set a target back in 2007. So we're able to look at their data for longer than the rest of our membership because we just started this year. So the City of London has been tracking their own data, and we're able to kind of look at what we project for our network going forward and how we are honing in on SDG number 13, climate action. Next slide. So I wanted to end off with Mr. Suzuki. Of course, the COVID-19 virus in some ways has slowed our momentum, and with health and well-being being on the top of our minds, we still can't help in our sector to take note of the environmental implications of the slowdown. Industry shutdowns and work from home policies have drastically reduced emissions and made significant and tangible improvements to air quality in some areas. So I wanted to leave this quote to remind us that as we build and look through the SDG lenses, that we have a unique opportunity to reimagine what we want our business as usual to be going forward. So it's in this moment of crisis, we should be asking what an economy is for, whether there are limits, how much is enough, and whether we are happier with all this stuff. Can we relearn what humanity has known since our very beginnings, that we live in a complex web of relationships in which our very survival and well-being depend upon clean air, water, and soil, and the diversity of species of plants and animals that we share with this planet. So that was, that's wrapping it up for me, the hyper-focused environmental SDG lens. So thanks for listening.
Thanks, Marianne. As I said, we'll have time for questions at the end. Thanks for presenting where Green Economy London is at. It's certainly a really exciting opportunity for the city to get involved. If you're interested in setting up your baselines, that's cool work. Kind of bridge into now, okay, so hopefully we sold you on yes, you can and yes, you should. build towards your sustainability goals. So how do you do that? I'm going to outline some of my thoughts on that. First is, I think it's really important that the organization has a clearly grounded purpose. That's where a lot of the alignment's going to come. So why does your organization exist? What does it seek to do? What's the change it seeks to make? And if you have that, then that can lead you to where are the alignments with your mission. So, as a cursory look, where are the goals, where are the areas, where the words even that pop out to you, gender equality or climate action, where do the goals grab you, and where do you think there might be some alignment to your mission? The other place that you can look is your vision statement. If you have a collaborative open vision statement, where are the vision statement, where's the future world that you see coming, that you're working towards building, that the UN sustainability goals could either, if accomplished, help you achieve that vision, or where you need to lean into those goals to help make that vision happen. Last but not least, a lot of organizations have existing goals. So can you look at your existing goals and say, hey, where these map at a high level to the goals? Once you've kind of done a high level mapping, it's worth, and it's in the resources that I'll share as well, mapping to the critical targets and indicators. So underneath each goal, there's a series of targets. And each target has an indicator that the UN is measuring. And it allows you to kind of look for some specific. So when you go through these, one of the things you will notice is a lot of the targets are around the developing world. That's because there's still a lot of work to do in those communities as mentioned, but there are lots of targets and indicators that we can work on locally. So then it's a matter of laddering up your existing goals. I don't think an organization necessarily needs to overhaul its performance or how it does its day-to-day work. It's figuring out where you show up, where your goals are, where your existing opportunities are as an organization to map to those goals. So as a practical example, I can give you sort of an outline of how we looked at it. So under 8.2, in 8.3, there's these concepts of basically what the living wage does. So as an employer here in Ontario, we are part of the Ontario Living Wage Network. We're a certified living wage organization. And our work in that goal, we were doing that before the UN sustainability goals, but that allows us to ladder up again to the 8.2 and 8.3. And then also 1.2 has a poverty reduction goal that a living wage is often tied to as well. So oftentimes it's the areas that you're already doing. The work that we do with Youth Opportunities Unlimited, their mission is really aligned to reducing the proportion of youth not employment, education, or training. So just in the activities that we already were doing, we can find that we're working towards some of the targets or the indicators. One thing I did want to take an opportunity to mention is sometimes the UN sustainability goals or what I say environmental is often looked at as anti-economy or anti-economic growth. It's important that the UN sustainability goals do look at the performance of the GDP and want to see companies continue to grow their economy and be successful, and in particular raise the growth of the developing nations. So it's not a economy versus ecology. It's how can we use the economy and the forces that within that economy to build to stronger ecology. So if you're interested in cash, the UN sustainability goals are still there for you. So kind of map this out at a high level, but what goals resonate? And then go down to the next level on the UN website and look at what critical indicators resonate. Where are you seeing the alignment between what you're doing and how you show up there? And are you currently actually inadvertently or deliberately working on some of those goals? Because I think a lot of the times, if you're an organization that is looking to do good out in the community, you'll find that there is a goal or a critical indicator or a target that is aligned to your activities. And then it's up to you to kind of look at what organizations can you move the dial on? What can your organization shift in the next 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, and 10 years, keeping in mind this is a 10-year goal and a lot can happen within 10 years, but also like to look at what can we do immediately, what can we change in the short term as well. What local indicators are there to work with, and I'll show you kind of where you can find some of that information. because some of the UN sustainability goals that are international goals have been broken down into regional goals. And last but not least, how will you measure and hold yourself accountable? So we're going to get into a little bit of the accountability side of that and measurement side, because I agree with Marianne, you know, what gets measured gets done. So I wanted to go over some of the tools and frameworks that exist. Excuse me. So the first one, for those that have been through the B Corp process, I know there's a couple B Corp, oh, it's going to force me to sign back in. Here I had everything nice and preloaded. Of course, it won't let me do that. So I'm going to show the B Corp impact assessment first. So this is a tool that was made available if you want to become a certified B Corp, and how you kind of show up in the world. And this is, you know, will again maybe showcase why the B Corp community and the UN sustainability goals are aligned, because these were questions that existed before the UN sustainability goals really came onto the map. So as an example, I talked a little bit about the living wage employer. So in the B Corp assessment, it asks you questions like, what's your lowest paid wage? What percentage of your employees are paid at least the equivalent of a living wage? Percentage above the living wage. So as you go through these questions and answer the questions on the B Corp assessment, you can get a good indicator of how you're doing. And the way the B Corp assessment works is you gain points every time you achieve a goal. So if we were to say 75% plus, that'll probably give us the maximum 1.48 points available. And what that means, you get an overall score, and to become a certified B Corp, you have to have a score of 80 out of 200 possible points. I'm sure Alex from McCabe could identify it's actually really tough to get to the 80 points. Most organizations are an average of 50 when they score themselves. And you can see here on the B Corp assessment, this is a relatively recent change. It'll actually show you where you can see alignments to the UN sustainability goals through your B Corp assessment. So I highly recommend, especially for for-profit businesses, taking a look at the B Corp assessment, because you may not be aware of some things that you could be doing better that would be an easy change for your organization to make. Both systems have this as well. They're based on the same system. If you said, you know what, our percentage of legal wage is your lowest hourly paid employee. Right now we're at 0%, but we really want to move to like 10% more than legal wage. Then this allows you to set a goal so that you can set a goal to achieve that. And then it has a whole goal management system. So you can use this to help hold yourself accountable. And you can change the due dates to, 1 month, 6 months, up to a year that you want to achieve this goal. So we've used this fairly effectively. Sometimes there's different eco challenges that you want to move the dial in your organization, and it's really helpful. They just released recently B Lab, which is the organization that runs the B Corp community, and the UN Global Compact will launch this UN Sustainability Goals Manager. And I wanted to take a quick look at that. So similar to the B Corp assessment, it asks you a bunch of questions as you go through the process. So it'll ask you some baseline questions, and then you can actually get into your work on the specific sustainability goals. So again, you'll see there's a question on payment of a living wage. Do you pay your people a living wage? So rTraction is a certified living wage employer, so we have the full 2.5 points. And then you can kind of see, I'm scrolling a little bit quickly, but there's a bunch of questions on, if you pay more than the minimum wage, you can get additional points. And you can actually see the link back to the B Corp assessment. And once again, if you had, what percentage of your workers are in extreme poverty, if you said 50%, which is not the case with rTraction, but just to illustrate, you could again say we're at 50%, but we want to move to 0% in 1 year. And it will send you email reminders and things like that. So if you're really interested in setting goals, or even seeing where you maybe have some opportunity to grow as an organization, this tool between the B Corp assessment and the UN SDG manager can give you a great idea of kind of where you're at from a baseline and how you're doing as an organization and what the opportunities are. And I had screenshots in case my internet connection didn't work. I'm going to skip the breakout. We had a little bit of a slow start because of some connectivity issues. So I'm going to skip this breakout session and move sort of right into the community links that exist. So a couple of different organizations that are working on it, both on the global level and the micro level. So the Presencing Institute out of MIT has a project Gaia that they're working on. It's not directly linked to the UN Sustainability Goals. They have a slightly different framework called the Theory U framework, but they're definitely working on some of the objectives in there. We have a local group called the Societal Transformation Lab. We have a local London hub that our project actually this year is to work on how we localize the UN Sustainability Goals. So that's our group here from one of our group sessions where we did our first session on trying to understand how the UN Sustainability Goals are operating in our community and what we can do to further localize them. That's again, we looked at which goals people are working on and mapped them out. Luis Perticio from the London Poverty Research Center at King's College has been doing some amazing work at looking at localizing the UN Sustainability Goals and what those measurements mean for you in London and region. So as an example, you know, one of the questions you get asked on the impact assessments are you paying at the living wage or above the living wage? The London Poverty Research Council has mapped a lot of what the local indicators are for those criteria. So we know in London, the living wage on a salary basis is $29,484. On a hourly basis, I believe it's about $16.50. So you can get that data. If you're wondering, am I on track with the local targets? The London Poverty Research Council has that data available, and it's in the resources link. And really what we looked at as our local group was what local targets resonate with us, and then how easy are they to accomplish. One of the things you'll find working with the UN Sustainability Goals is there's a lot of passion towards moving the needle on some of these issues, but they're big, complex, wicked problems. So this is where we need to collaborate, work together on it. Other organizations out in the community that I know are working on this type of activity and localizing the UN goals. London Poverty Research Council, London Community Foundation is starting to incorporate it into the vital signs and other aspects of its work. Pillar Nonprofit Network is really aggressively adopting UN sustainability goals as well for all of its programming. There's the Western Center for Environment and Sustainability at Western is doing a lot of work localizing the goals as well. And the City Symposium, which is, I believe, a monthly talk. I'm not sure how frequently, might be monthly, might be every couple months. They have a talk, and each talk is focusing on one of the UN sustainability goals. This is more for sending out afterwards, but all the links to some of the things that we talked about today. And that is a wrap of the formal part of the program. Again, thanks for everyone for attending, and for Marianne for being a co-host and co-presenter, and for the sponsors that made it happen today. At this point, I will stop sharing my screen and open it up to any questions.
Before you do that, I did add the questions that came up to the end of the presentation.
Oh, I have to refresh to probably get those.
I think so.
I can address the question that was asked to me. It was Ruiz, I believe, that asked about navigating funding opportunities for initiatives and projects. So I just wanted to give like a quick overview from this year for us. We were able to secure about $175,000 worth of funding for members through different incentives. The largest one and the biggest contributor was a federal application for 50% cost sharing of a solar array. The project hasn't been installed, so I can't announce it or give any information about it, but the money has been committed. So the federal government very quickly put up about a 30-day window for people to apply for efficiency projects, and we had that. We try to keep up to date on all of that stuff as a hub, and then we give our members that information as fast as we can. So we were able to help them put that application in, and it was actually one of our members helped another member put the application in with our guidance, and then they got the funding. So it's about $170,000 worth of funding for half of a huge solar array, which would put them at it would cover almost all of their electricity needs. For a larger place. There's private funding that we're familiar with that we help people navigate through utilities. So Enbridge has some funding for efficiency. Save on Energy has funding that we familiarize ourselves. And then that was federal, private. And then we also look at some kind of like local creative solutions. So this year, for example, we asked the LCF to support projects, and we vetted it for them. So they gave us a $5,000 pilot grant that we were able to give out to our members, and we vetted the criteria, the project's likelihood of being completed, what the sustainability goals were with it, and how they matched it. Our members applied for the money, and we ended up giving it out to 2 different organizations. One will be saving roughly $22,000 worth of water a year by implementing a pump that we found through an audit. And the other one will be using the money to grow greens locally instead of importing them for sale from California. So that reduces their scope 3 carbon emissions significantly. We also had some funding come through LEN, which is doing an LED retrofit for a member as well. Well, they're coaching them through it and giving them a $1,000 incentive. So that's kind of just like being hip to what's going on locally and federally and in the efficiency sector, and then sharing that information as soon as you get it, because a lot of the windows are fairly short. So that's how I've been navigating that, and then trying to find opportunities for internal supports and internal incentives. And then we do expect that coming out of COVID, there will be some green stimulus packages, and we're hoping that a lot of that funding is for efficiency projects as well. So if you want to sign up for our newsletter or LEN's newsletter, we do share that information as soon as we have it.
So the next one was from Mary Lee Townsend, and it was, how does the UN sustainability goals fit into other sustainability tracking frameworks and tools to measure sustainability?
Good question. I think the answer is it depends. I have heard, and I can't remember the name of the framework that a couple of local organizations were using, and they've been able to kind of ladder them up. I think the short answer is when you really get into the critical indicators, so the goals themselves, again, I think one of the reasons that they're effective is they're simple, but all the nuance and complexity is underneath that. So when we started working, with the goals, we said, we're really working on 8, 3, and 11, but we didn't dig down too much initially into the critical indicators. So I kind of feel like it's one of those things that you ease into a little bit over time, and then it's really looking at where you choose to map and where you choose to put your effort in. The measurement itself is at the global level. So without some of the other local frameworks, it'll be hard to know if we're making a local impact, and that's where the work of London Poverty Research Council and London Community Foundation and others is going to show up. Because if you go to the website, they have the targets that they're working to achieve. We just wouldn't have the opportunity to get our heads around even how to measure some of that locally. But some of the other frameworks do a better job of measuring the local impact on the collective impact side. So it would be looking at like how they ladder up. And for me, it's more important to have the spirit of the alignment than having it perfectly aligned. So, for example, working on poverty reduction, one of the strategies is a living wage and paying more than the minimum wage. it's important that we talk about that in our local community and not worry too much about whether or not it perfectly matches up to the specific lettering of the goal. That's my opinion. The other thing I could suggest is Googling the framework and the UN Sustainability Goals and see if somebody's actually done the work to map.
Hi, sorry, I think I stepped out to take a little bit of a break. Answering the question, of course, I come racing back in. But I guess my question specifically is Western, and I know the likes of Fanshawe College as well, has put in significant amount of time, effort, and energy into the STARS program, which is a program done through ASHE, based out of the States, but really is becoming a global program, helping post-secondary education, educational facilities aim towards integrating sustainability. So there's been a lot of effort into it. So I'm just wondering if there's any easy way for us to align what we've been doing with STARS to the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think from a global perspective, it gives us more of a presence, the Sustainable Development Goals, but we can't lose the, I guess, specificity that we get with STARS.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if you heard that part of the answer, but I think there's some of the frameworks are going to have better specificity on the specific things that you want to do that may or may not be necessarily aligned to the UN Sustainability Goals. So it's looking for, where do you ladder up? How does the story connect? How does the spirit of the goal connect? Because I would agree you don't want to lose the specificity, because as you go up through the framework in the UN Sustainability Goals, it becomes more and more vague. You know, no poverty is an amazing goal, but what does that actually mean?
Right.
You know, I think the average living dollar they want is more than $1.25 a day. Well, you know, in North America, we've already achieved that. So for most people anyway, so like, okay, what does that actually mean on a local level? So Luis Patricio, it's in the resources list. There's a massive Google sheet, and you can kind of see how they've mapped the local indicators that they're aware of to kind of what would be a UN sustainability goal. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody's done something with that, with STARS. So I can ask and within our group and find out if that exists and get back to you.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Nicole, do you have to be a B Corp in order to adopt these goals and display them as part of your business? Absolutely not. I think B Corps are, I think I maybe showed in some of the assessments, like a lot of the questions that we asked ourselves of B Corps, like, are we paying people a living wage? Are we polluting our environment through our business activities? Are we being good community stewards? The questions that we asked ourselves as B Corps to be better community members are also in support of the UN Sustainability Goals, but the UN goals have no direct link to B Corps. We've just, I think, collectively decided to put our energy behind collaborating and promoting the UN goals. So I'd say, you know, the B Corps, there's about 3,000 of them across the globe that are now really starting to put some weight into the UN Sustainability Goals, but they're the United Nations. They're for everybody. Hopefully that Nicole maybe popped off, but we'll send her the video answer. Jared, can you review your slide? You mentioned 2030 is the point of no return for catastrophic event. Yes, I can send some materials on that. I believe that it is one of those debates that rages. That's why the Paris Climate Accord also has 2030 as the end goal. I believe it was to reduce the global temperature by, I think, 2 degrees or something. There had to be, to keep it capped at that. Maybe one of the people from the LEN have better data that they can share as well. And then I've seen, you know, obviously things that refute that. But there was enough urgency that's why the Paris Climate Accord was 2030. But I don't know, Skylar, if you have, or Marianne, if you have any more data points.
I added on the slide the one that you sent in the chat.
Oh, okay. She sent one in the chat. Okay, great.
I
Yeah,
don't know if you want to say anything about that.
I can just throw in, so the IPCC has released a report last year that we can circulate, where essentially it is by 2030, if we aren't reducing our emissions significantly, it essentially turns into a feedback loop. And that's where like the catastrophic damages come in. So 2030 is the horizon that the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has put that together. So I will find that link and put it in the chat as well.
And well, if we can't find it before we close, we'll send it out after the fact as well. Jared, does that answer your question, comment, concern?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
What Marianne shared, I wasn't aware of, so that was also great. And thanks, Skylar, for sharing that.
Perfect.
I can share it myself.
There was another question that came in, and it says from Nua, there are thoughts that COVID-19 is fundamentally an environmental crisis being manifested as a health problem. Would your organizations agree with this? And do you think it brings an opportunity to promote sustainable development? So I just wanted to say that I don't feel that I have an authority to say that where COVID started from or how it manifested. I mean, there's lots of theories, and I think it might be too soon to fully support any of them. But I think that regardless of where COVID came from, you can certainly see a lot of similarities arising, or interesting behavior patterns. So COVID-19 is an immediate health problem, and we're choosing collectively to react. In my opinion, climate change is also an immediate health problem. And I would like to see us carry that momentum forward. Like we're starting to learn how to deal with a health crisis in this way. And I feel that climate change and sustainability could be also viewed as a health problem and dealt with as a more urgently if it was seen as a health problem or as a threat to our future generations or our children. I don't know if anyone else would like to touch on that.
I mean, from my perspective, I think they're probably linked. I think if you were to change it from climate crisis to sustainability crisis, so not just the environmental aspect, but all of the indicators that we're working through the UN sustainability goals, if those indicators were more advanced, I think the crisis would be less. So I think when you look at something like a pandemic, the UN sustainability goals, climate action change, everything's interlinked. If you don't have good health and well-being, it's really hard to show up every day and care about the environment. If you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from, you kind of get some of the higher give needs stuff. But you need people kind of well-fed and paying attention to things like climate change to be able to care about kind of what their climate impact is. So I think everything I mentioned in the formal presentation as well, everything's interconnected. Whether or not there's a direct link to COVID-19 and climate, I've seen some things that might indicate that it is, and I'm sure there's as many that are equally that it has nothing to do with it. But I think how we respond and how healthy we are and how able we are to respond to the pandemic and future pandemics is going to be directly linked to how we have a healthy climate. Because if we're not healthy humans, we're not going to have as good of a time fighting off viruses. If anyone else has anything to add or any other questions, I think those were all the formal questions that we had during the chat. Hopefully this was informative and helpful. I'm around for the next 10 minutes at least. So if there's any more questions, feel free to pop them in the chat or video and thanks, John, for running the show. Appreciate it, John.
Guys, thank you so much for the presentation. I'm going to head out. I've just taken a quick look at the STARS reporting tool, and it turns out that there's a new version of the reporting tool that includes the
Awesome.
So I'm really excited about that, and we have some wonderful co-op students that are going to be working with us this summer, and I foresee this being something that they work on for us.
That's awesome. That's the B Corp, as maybe saw on my screen, the B Corp assessment is doing the same thing. And that's where I think, it's good time to be educating yourself on at least some of the principles, because I do think you'll start to see these sneak into other collective frameworks where the alignment is. It's just gaining a lot of traction.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks again.
Thanks,
And,
Marianne. Glad you could attend.
Definitely look forward to.
Or Mary Lee, sorry.
That's okay. Bye, guys. Have a good day. Bye.
Bye.